Everybody, thanks for watching. Just a quick reminder that Afterlife is now available. Also, Merkabah Academy will be launching the 30th, May 30th. So you guys who have become members will receive emails soon about login instructions or what have you. I'll also put a video out on YouTube explaining the website so far. There's going to be, a lot coming to the website. As you will see, it will be a large platform. There will be a lot going on with the site. So it's going to launch May 30th, as I said, the end of May. And it's going to definitely be something that is going to benefit a lot of people. So thanks to everybody who have become members and to all the people who got in and was able to get the membership, lifetime membership, or what have you. Appreciate you guys' support and patience. Flash drives are also still available. And DVDs. DVDs are probably not going to be around for much longer. So put out a deal for the DVDs. If you want to get them all, definitely take advantage of them because the physical DVDs are definitely not going to be around for too much longer. I know as some people who rely specifically on physical DVDs. So if you get the old ones, that'll be okay. I'm going to basically stop selling a lot of the old ones, or probably all of the old ones, and the newer ones will still come out on DVD, but the old ones will probably be gone. So if you want to get the 57 now that's available on DVD, now it's the time to do it because they're going to be gone pretty soon. So thanks to everybody who supports that. Now, get into this video. Again, we keep seeing a lot with Christians and the debating of the validity of the Bible. And this is just one of the things that you have to be a student of history to really understand how absurd debating the Bible and its validity is, because there's no validity to the book. There's no real history to the book as far as what we have been told, from the Bible. So, the whole story of Moses, right? And then, the law he broke and all that kind of stuff, and tribe of Judah and all these tribes having something to do with the creation of the Old Testament. All this stuff is all fictional stuff that you read from a book. There's no proof or fact to any of those stories. It's only stories. So we have to go and look at real actual history as to what proven history tells us where we get the books from, which I talk about a lot. But in this video right here, you're going to get a real rude awakening as to how much so you don't know about the Old Testament. But talked about before, what we can prove, what history tells us. We have the creation of the Old Testament given to us by the Greeks. Now, when you look at history, real history, you got to look at the time frame. You got to understand that around this time where you have the Septuagint being created, this is the time where you have the Greeks ruling what we know as Israel as well as Egypt. Now, Egypt was ruled by the ancient Egyptians. That land we call Israel as well, of course, was ruled by the ancient Egyptians. And we got to understand that this territory here was Egyptian territory for a long time. And it was shared by the Greeks. The ancient Egyptians, as I talked about, taught the Greeks, taught the Romans, who during for a long period of time also coexisted in Libya with Africans there. So according to their own history and what they admit themselves, they will tell you completely, yes, Pythagoras and Thales and all these people, Aristotle and all of them, went into Kemet to learn, and they don't, they admit that. They don't deny it. So we know that's a fact. Now, this is the part that people just got to get in their head, that this happened, that this happened. So the people who think it's just completely crazy and in left field that the Greeks can be responsible for the Bible don't know real history. So when you go back, as I was saying, you have the inception, the creation, the first, notion of an Old Testament or biblical anything given to us by the Greeks, who, as the letters of Orestes states, that Ptolemy II Philadelphus commissioned 72 Hebrew elders, 6 from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, to come to Alexandria, Egypt, to do a translation of the Jewish Hebrew law into Greek. And if you know about Greek mythology, Then you understand about Plato's law. And if you know about Greek history, you know the Greeks basically get Plato's law or the whole concept from the 42 laws of Ma'at. These people all came into Kemet and got that idea from Kemet, plain and simple. So, as the story goes, basically took these 72 Hebrew elders, put them in 72 different rooms, and they all emerged with identical copies of the Septuagint in Greek, which just sounds crazy. And they did it supposedly, I think it was 72 days or what have you. So identical copies, all the same. They all wrote the same thing. Now, we don't have that copy that they supposedly wrote. We don't have it. The only proof we have of the Septuagint is just a fragment, I believe, of Deuteronomy 23. That's it. That's all we have that exists of the original, supposedly one of the original Septuagints. But that fragment predates anything that would be Hebrew. So again, you know, when you look at this right here, you know, it's talking about the Hebrew law, the Hebrew Bible. We never had this. We have never had any proof that this existed, that it's real. This is what you got to get in your head. We have never had it. The only mention of this would be, of course, from your Bible, and of course from the letters of Orestes, of this supposedly being, you know, Hebrew. But it says again clearly here, you have the Septuagint Greek, and the Septuagint, you know, given to us, you know, by the Greeks. Again, going back in history and understanding at this time, you know, you had the Greeks ruling the land that we know as Israel as well as Egypt. So they had this land. There is absolutely no mention by anybody, any Greek historian, any Greek scholar, ancient Greek, nobody from around that time is talking about any Jews or any Hebrews. Nobody. There's no mention. Now, you have to go back and look throughout the world. Every civilization, every group of people that we know of that did anything near the level that the Jews supposedly have done when you read the Bible, there's proof. There are, you know, monuments. There are, you know, ruins. There are bodies, tombs, so on and so forth. Writings. Because you would have to think that somebody from the civilization wrote something other than what was biblical, or wrote at least about the religion or something, you know, having to do with their life or what was going on with the wars. I mean, you have all these wars with the Hebrew Israelites going on, and it's nobody documenting these wars besides, you know, supposedly the Bible, but no person outside of that. You know, why is nobody talking about this? Why is there isn't any cave art or pictures or paintings or anything that would give validity to the story that we read in the Bible? Nothing at all. Plain and simple. Also, when you go into Israel, there are way more ancient Egyptian artifacts found than anything belonging to any Hebrew Israelite during the same time. So supposedly you had the Hebrews ruling in this land. We find absolutely nothing that would put them there during that time, predating anything or existing around the same time as anything that's ancient Egyptian, plain and simple. So what we get all the time is this pottery stuff. You get pottery shards and stuff that look like, you know, somebody wrote on it 2 days ago that supposed to be, you know, Hebrew or Paleo-Hebrew, and that for some reason they can't determine or give a true date. Is always speculated that this is a date, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense to find these so-called pottery shards and don't find anything else. Whereas with ancient Egypt, the ancient Egyptians, we find all of this stuff: jewelry, pottery out the ass with clear, legible writing that is ancient Egyptian. You find this here. They found this foot, this part of a statue that was found near Galilee. So it's like we're finding tons and tons of ancient Egyptian artifacts in Israel, but nothing from the so-called Hebrew Israelites themselves. And you got to think about that. You got to really look at that. And again, you know, I talk about this stuff a lot, but I'm really putting this out. It's a lot of people really coming out of Christianity and really digging into or trying to figure out the truth about all this. And this is what you need to run into, because A lot of people don't look for this stuff. A lot of people have no clear understanding of where to start, nor do they know what the Septuagint is or anything else. But you got to look at this stuff. And you got to understand that for hundreds of years, the people around that area spoke Greek. There was just no Hebrew. It's no proof of Hebrew. So again, you got to think about that. For all this time, where is the Hebrew philosophers and the Hebrew poets? Where are the poems and paintings or anything with Hebrew writing on it? There's nothing. Absolutely nothing. Until we pop up, boom, and start getting the biblical text later on that's in Hebrew, like the Masoretic text and stuff like that. We start getting that stuff that's in Hebrew that's way late. It's not even BC. We're talking about AD stuff now. You have to also look at the books that we would get that will eventually give us lead up to the New Testament coming from the Romans. So again, you have to look at actual history in accordance to this biblical time, which, as we see, you had the Greeks ruling and basically pushing this doctrine, and then eventually Rome would take over, and then all of a sudden we get the New Testament. And a lot of people is not putting this together. It's like don't seem weird to nobody. It don't seem weird that during this time where you have the Greeks ruling in Egypt as well as Israel, that we get basically the inception of the Old Testament, given to us by the Greeks, not by no Hebrews. There's no proof Hebrews give us anything. It's just a so-called story that has been proven to be false. And then around the same time we had a Romans ruling, not only do they continue Hellenization, a practice that the Greeks was doing, they continue that for years, but then all of a sudden during their reign we get the New Testament and they give it to us in Latin. So you got to think about that. So you have Vetus Latina, that's supposed to be old, it's basically called Old Italia, Old Italian, that is written in, where you have different scholars or different translations, not translations, but different scribes, I should say, basically giving us these versions of the Old and New Testament that basically is supposed to come from the Septuagint. So you get St. Jerome that comes on later and gives us the Latin Vulgate. I talked about all this before. In the Latin Vulgate, St. Jerome decides to basically switch up a bunch of the lingo and the words and the stories in the Latin Vulgate to basically go off of what the Hebrews of the time was speaking. Again, this is AD. This is not BC stuff I'm talking. So he got a lot of criticism on that, which will later lead to everything else with the codices and everything like that. So you got to look at all this. And then how did the Septuagint fall the way it fell when you had the control that Rome had on the books? The Vetus Latina and the Latin Vulgate supposedly contains the entire Septuagint. So you got to think about that. But yet we only have a fragment that survives to this day that we don't really know how old that is. So all of it is suspect. It's all suspect. And you got to look at it all. As again, I talked about Dr. Joseph Yehuda, who gave us the book Hebrew is Greek, where he proves 100%, and I will say it again, 100%, he proved it. The book has been reviewed, and there is nothing nobody can say. He proves it. It's 100% proven. So when we get into this lingo, the so-called debate about it, it's done. There's not really no debate. That proves it right there, which is why I've been showing you guys that book for years. Find it today. You can't find it. Last I checked, it was worth $7,000. I told you guys about it when it would cost $700. I said, buy it. I keep bringing that up, but they're gone. You can't find them. And in that book, he proves that Hebrew comes from Greek, as well as Arabic comes from Greek. But it gets deeper, as we're going to get into in a second. I've been putting out the ancient history series and the Bible series I've been putting out to really get you guys to see the history and like what this stuff is really talking about and where they're getting this stuff from. If you read and study Greek mythology, it's clear as day where this stuff is coming from. And it's not me just saying this. Again, I get a lot of backlash from people who don't know nothing. I mean, these people ain't doing no damn research. It's shit crazy to even come at me knowing you ain't did no damn research. A lot of people can't even fathom that the Bible could have stolen from Greek mythology, because in their heads they think, well, this stuff happened before Greek mythology. But people really don't understand how far back Greek mythology goes. We're talking about prior to 1000 BCE. Proven. Isn't it? This is proven. So we had Greek writers way back then who was writing books and had stories. Basically, when you trace it back, mimicking ancient Egyptian mythology. Same thing, Greek mythology. I already went through all that. Rome did the same thing once they came into the sole understanding of what the Greeks was doing, and they jumped on the bandwagon and seen how powerful it was, and they basically stole from Greek mythology and started creating this Roman mythology. So when you see Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, I mean, it all stems from Egyptian mythology, but it's the same stuff. Plain and simple. So a lot of people can't fathom that, and I challenge anybody. I don't care who you go get or what you try to cite or what have you. No one can show you anything biblical that was written before 1000 BCE. Plain and simple. And prove it. I'm not talking about no pottery shards and no bullshit that they keep popping up with that's supposedly Paleo-Hebrew. And if you don't understand about the lingo around that time or what they're actually trying to do, piggybacking on the language that, you know, when the Greeks is basically trying to get the alphabet from out of the Phoenicians, which the Phoenicians get the alphabet from the ancient Egyptians. So they're trying to use the Phoenician conversion, or the Greek, I should say, conversion of the Phoenician alphabet into Greek from ancient Egyptian, and try to use that and say it's Paleo-Hebrew, or this is where the stuff is coming from. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. They're trying to do anything they can to put the Hebrews in position. The biggest question you got to ask yourself is, why ain't nobody talking about them? Why hasn't anybody mentioned them? How come we can't find no bodies or no tombs or no homes or what have you? Nothing. We can find nothing from these people. And nobody's talking about them. So this is what you got to ask yourself. So we go back and look. You have to look at these stories and understand where the stuff comes from. As I said before, you have Adam and Eve, Pandora. Plain and simple. The story is just clear as day to see where they copied it from. Noah's Ark is Deucalion the Pharaoh, but there's other stories that I'm going to get into in a second. You have Samson and Hercules. I mean, it just goes on. And it's so easy to see what it is. It's just when you explain it to people, the fact that it is so easy. Like when you say Samson or Hercules, people say, you know, that's too easy for it to be true. But that's what it is. Now, there are many books on this subject. It's a lot of people who talked about this stuff. It's a lot of scholars who have decades ago already made and proven the comparison to the Bible, Old Testament, and Greek mythology. And it's not hard to do if you read Greek mythology. You only get certain parts of it, but it's a lot of anything having to do with Homer and the Iliad and all those other great ancient Greek works. When you start to read them and really get into the story, it's clear as day. The biggest gimme is Plato's Law. So now it says here, Plato, in the creation of the Hebrew Bible, for the first time compares the ancient law collections of the ancient Near East, the Greeks, and the Pentateuch to determine the legal antecedents, which antecedents basically means predecessor, what preceded, for the biblical law. Following on from his 2006 work, Berosus in Genesis, Manetho in Exodus, Merkabah takes up his theory that the Pentateuch was written around 270 BCE using Greek sources found in the Great Library of Alexandria, and implies this to an examination of the biblical law codes. A striking number of legal parallels are found between the Pentateuch and Athenian law, and specifically with those found in Plato's law of circa 350 BCE. Constitutional features in biblical law, Athenian law, and Plato's law also contain close correspondence. Several genres of biblical law, including the Decalogue, are shown to have striking parallels with Greek legal collections, and the synthesis of narrative and legal content is shown to be compatible with Greek literature. All this evidence points to direct influence from Greek writing, especially Plato's law, on a biblical legal tradition. Finally, it is argued that the creation of the Hebrew Bible took place according to the program found in Plato's law for creating a legally authorized national ethical literature, reinforcing the importance of this specific Greek text to the authors of the Torah and Hebrew Bible in the early Hellenistic era. This study offers a fascinating analysis of the background of the Pentateuch and will be of interest not only to biblical scholars, but also to students of Plato, ancient law, and Hellenistic literary traditions. Now let me explain for a quick second. You gotta understand. Now, for anybody, forensic, you have people who do handwriting analysis and people who do plagiarism analysis. People who really do this. This is like a profession. So it's very easy for someone to look at a writing style and compare it to another writing style. Now, you got to think about the mind and the way it works. You can't do something you was never taught to do. You understand what I'm saying? So you have people who write a certain way back then in ancient Greeks, the way they write stories. So what they did was look at the way ancient Greek stories was written, the pattern. It's a specific method that stories was written. And they look at that and they compare it to the Bible. And it's the same type of pattern, the same type of, protagonist, antagonist type stories and theories and so on and so forth that match up with Greek mythology and ancient Greek stories. So based on that, they can look at that and say, this wasn't written by no Hebrew. This isn't something that was just passed down and somebody writing an account of something that happened. This is written and structured the way an ancient Greek, story would be structured. Meaning that somebody Greek wrote it. Plain and simple. It's not something that should be anywhere like Greek if it was written by 72 Hebrew elders that have no understanding or idea of this ancient Greek story that, supposedly didn't exist before the time this stuff was being written. If you understand what I'm saying, like, it shouldn't be the same. So how is it that, the going-ons and happenings of the ancient Hebrew Israelites, the story that they memorized, supposedly in the oral Torah, memorized, and everybody memorized this oral Torah and they have this whole, mindset on how it's supposed to be pronounced. How is it that it comes out in the same type of form as Greek mythological story or Greek story? It shouldn't come out that way. It says here, in 2011, the classical scholar Bruce Loudon also reached a similar conclusion, namely that some biblical books might have been influenced directly or indirectly by Homer's writing. Brody Loudon and I have independently made similar observations about the story of Joseph in Genesis 37-50 in comparison to Odysseus' return to Ithaca. That's from the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey 14-24, and have also reached similar conclusions regarding the number of parallels between Homer's Odyssey and Genesis. The similar order in which these parallels appear indicate that Genesis was modeled after the Odyssey. Loudon writes, the parallels and the divergencies suggest to me both that some from the Odyssey served as a model for individual parts of Genesis, particularly the myth of Joseph, and that, like the Odyssey, the redactors of Genesis link together many different genres of myth to form parts of a larger Gnostis return story. Now, a Gnostis is basically like a Greek story where the hero returns home by sea, like, Deucalion the Pharaoh or like Odysseus. So it says here, there is already sufficient evidence to propose that Genesis' use of Homer is a reasonable working hypothesis. The author of Genesis used the Odyssey, especially in composing chapters 11-50. The unified way in which Genesis uses the Odyssey indicates that Genesis as a whole reflects a single process of composition. Now let's look at some of these similarities. The cycle of Abraham shows similarities to the epic of the Argonauts. Abraham almost sacrificed his son Isaac to Yahweh, but an angel stopped him at the last moment. Instead of his son, Abraham sacrificed a ram, which he found stuck in the thicket by its horns. Yahweh then renewed the promise that Abraham's descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. Genesis 22. Quite similarly, Artemis, king of Boeotia, almost sacrificed his son, Phrixus, to Zeus. But a winged golden ram took Phrixus on its back and brought him safe to Colchis. And there, Phrixus sacrificed it to Zeus and hung its golden fleece on an oak tree. One generation later, Jason and the Argonauts set sail to Colchis to bring the golden fleece back to Greece. On the way back, while the Argonauts were stranded on the coast of Libya, Euphemus received the promise by the god Trenton that his descendants would inherit the land of Cyrene. Generations later, Bathus, a descendant of Euphemus, consulted the oracle of Delphi about his stutter. The voice of the god Apollo ordered him to take the descendants of Euphemus to the promised land of Cyrene. Although Bathus first protested that he did not feel up to the task and that he stuttered, he eventually led his people to Cyrene and ruled over them for 40 years. What does this sound like, people? The story is quite strikingly similar to that of Abraham receiving the promise of a land for his descendants, and Moses fulfilling this promise by bringing the Israelites to the gates of Canaan. Like Bathus, or Battus, however you pronounce that, Moses too at first protested, arguing that he could not speak well. Exodus 4:10, we all know this, and led his people for 40 years in the wilderness. Deuteronomy 1:3.